everyone to another episode of the Embrace Fertility podcast / YouTube channel. We're back today with another fertility expert interview. And today we have Daniel with us from Men's Helpline. Daniel set up this non-profit to support men emotionally through infertility, miscarriage, IVF. He's based in Israel. He has 2 children and lives with his wife. He has a BA from Queen's College in political science and a master's degree in non-profit management and leadership from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. He loves sports and music. He plays the saxophone, piano, and loves singing. He's a volunteer EMT. I had to Google that. Daniel, tell us about that to start with. So what is being a volunteer EMT?
So in a lot of countries, and even around the UK, they have ambulance services like you have the NIH, the ambulance. So I'm a volunteer emergency medical technician,
Amazing.
which means I can get called out at any point in time, leave what I'm doing at the drop of a call out, and for any type of emergency, medical, trauma, motor vehicle accident, delivering a baby. So
Wow.
many different types of call, drop what I'm doing to go help save a life.
I love that because I saw it and I was like, and I had like a feeling that it was that. And then, Googled it. I was like, interesting. Definitely need to talk about that. So the topic we're talking today is men's experiences of IVF and miscarriage. And I know about 20% of my listeners are male. So this is going to be so helpful both for them, but also for those of you who are obviously partnered with a guy, for how you can support them during this time, because so much of the emotional support and the information available is aimed at women. And so this is going to be a really useful and insightful conversation for everybody, I hope. So let's just dive straight in, Daniel. We've got like a little list here of things that we wanted to cover in this course. So we're going to fire through them and try and give you as much information as possible. And then you can obviously check out all of the resources that Daniel offers at the end for more information. So let's start off with the do's and don'ts during IVF.
It's a great question. There are so many do's and don'ts of what to do and what not to do during IVF. The first thing to do is make sure that you are well educated about what it means to go through fertility treatments. That doesn't mean, when I say don't, it means don't dive down the world of WebMD, because if you go down the world of WebMD, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and everybody's experiences are so completely different. So that's one do, one don't. And as far as other do's, men really should be educated and be involved in the process of IVF. As much as possible, I encourage men to go to all of the appointments, whether it be an ultrasound, whether it be blood work, whether it be your regular family medical physician, whether it be any type of appointment that's related to fertility, that you can start having this conversation. Even if you're dealing with male factor infertility, bring your wife with you to the urologist. You want to be on the same playing field as everybody else. You want to have that open conversation, because what happens a lot of times is that couples are not on that same field. So when you go through a cycle, it takes a tremendous amount of communication, specifically during the 2-week wait, during the shots are timed. What are her likes? What are her dislikes? Especially because of all the hormones. So you want to be engaged as much as possible. As far as the don'ts of IVF, first off, don't go off running into depression. Know yet that you're not alone, because the statistics show 1 in 6 couples go through infertility, 1 in 4 pregnancies end in a miscarriage. So it means that the person to your left, the person to your right, has probably gone through it, or if not them, they know somebody who has. So don't be afraid to talk about it, process it, make sure you have a good therapist. I really encourage people to seek out a therapist and develop a network of people that they can trust and they can talk to about the issues, because communication is so important throughout the process of IVF, because if you don't have that communication and you're on a different wavelength than your spouse, then you're not going to be as successful, because the stress levels throughout the process is so high. So that being open as much as possible is the key to success, and also keeping a positive mindset throughout, and knowing that just because this cycle wasn't successful for whatever reason, you didn't get as many embryos as you had liked, or transfer worked and then failed, and you suffered a miscarriage. Know that the mindset is so key, that this was a success, and keep that optimism and that positivity throughout, because it is a long journey, it is a process, and you have to take everything with a grain of salt, and take strides to the next step, and know that this is a positive thing on your journey and your pursuit of parenthood. It's so it's such a process.
And
Those are some of the do's.
I love what you said about going to all appointments together, because that's been a huge thing. I mainly support women through the Embrace Fertility Method course that I have. And during COVID, a lot of women were told their partners were not allowed to come with them for any of those appointments. And the emotional backlash of that, even that's still going on today, even though now you can take your partners, but having that realization of how much just having someone there with you to literally hold your hand is so huge. But also to gather that information, otherwise one partner is getting this huge amount of information, and then going back and trying to communicate that to their other half. And if you can just both be there in the room and go like, well, what did you hear, and what advice do you think they were saying, and make that decision together, rather than it being sort of one person taking the lead and then the other one playing catch up.
Yeah, and that's so true, because there is a lot of information that's given out at an appointment, and a lot of things that you need to process. I do encourage people to get involved as much as possible. I understand, the whole COVID experience, everybody was scared, right? But what the practitioners were not thinking about was, I understand that we have a pandemic, right? A pandemic's a pandemic, but at the same time, fertility treatments aren't stopping. They have to look at it as, what is the experience for that couple as a whole. Oftentimes I tell people to really look at, specifically practitioners, you have to look at the couple as a whole. Is this good for them at the right time? Right? How is it going to react emotionally, physically, mentally? Yes, while the woman is the one going through the treatment and her body is physically experiencing it and going through all the hormones and the actual process of the retrieval and the transfer, the man is actually sitting there watching the whole thing, watching her grieve, watching her pain, watching her be bloated. So it's really, really critical that physicians, and if you could communicate with your physician, push their boundaries, ask a lot of questions, because the more involved you are in the process, the more you push them, you might have somewhat of a better outcome, because they're going to involve you more. Let them know that you want to be there as part of this journey.
And I would say, yeah, prepare your questions. Like, actually take in with you a piece of paper with all your questions on, and do not get up from that chair until you are satisfied with every single answer. Because a lot of time you go and you get so overwhelmed, all this information's thrown at you, and then you leave and you're like, yeah, but what does that mean? What does that suggest to me? What? And so also, if you sit there and just take your time, and I say at the end of the meeting, literally like hold your piece of paper. And I used to do this. I was the person at the end of the appointments, they'd be like, all right, bye then. And I'd be like, and 0.5. And like, to really feel like, because you think as well, the majority of the time, these practitioners, you are their paying patient. You are like their client, their customer. And sometimes it can kind of flip, that it feels like they're doing you this massive favor by letting you do treatment with them, especially in the UK with the NHS, where it's such a postcode lottery. But again, they're there to support you. And don't be, I think with the NHS as well, in this country, we're very much like, oh, they don't have much time and they're really busy, they need to get on to their next people. Whatever, put you and your partner first. If you need a few more minutes with a few more questions answered, or maybe if they don't have time, you're like, well, could you email me that? Like, doctors and physicians, they do also have email addresses. They may not give you their direct address, but it could go through their reception or their PA. but really get what you can out of them. So that, yes, it helps you feel more in control and more, what's the word? Yeah, so you really understand what's happening.
And that's so important. And what you said is they look at you like, yeah, it's a business, it's a patient. It's so true. They're there to see you and to make money for the practice. But even around the world, with fertility treatments being so expensive, that it's really a money making machine. So they want to see as many patients as possible and do as many transfers and receivals so that their practices are happy. So to push that boundary and try and make that connection with that practitioner, with that PA, with that doctor, with that nurse, and try and get their contact details. That is super important because you need to have that communication. And I think the way medicine is evolving, there's a lot of technology. I feel like doctors are hopefully going to be giving you their personal numbers because there's,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to fertility. I mean, it's such everything is so timed and pressurized that you might have a question that comes up in the middle. Like, for example, when we were doing the cycle and I was giving my wife the shots, we had to trigger at a certain time. And I thought I gave the wrong dose. I didn't do it properly. I was freaking out. What do I do? And I had to reach out to my doctor to find out, can I give another dose? Did I do it properly? Like, are we going to wind up having to do the retrieval later on because of this mistake? So it's so critical. Questions will arise, and it's important to have all those tools of communications and those resources at your fingertips to ask those questions, to have the answers and to have the support.
And I love that because I think it's very much going through with IVF is like having another job, with the amount of administration, the appointments, and the responsibility that they put onto you. And I remember that as well. You've gone through, all of those injections, all of those scans, all of those blood tests, and like the trigger shot is like, this is crucial. If we get this wrong, that's it, game over. And yeah, we had like a solid stone tile floor in our rental flat in London, and Luke got the needle like out of the fridge and dropped it, and it was like a glass far, dropped it, and like part of it like popped off, and it was like, like luckily it could still work because it was really late on a Sunday evening, so there was nowhere to get another vial. But it was having that kind of, I think it's a lot of the time with your you're taking your health and your medicine, it's then on to you, isn't it? It's like you have to do it, or you and your partner have to do it together. So that's something I found so helpful with Luke, my partner, when we were going through it. He was doing the injections for me because I hate needles. And I don't, if I look, then I tense up and then it hurts. Whereas if I didn't look and I was just like, la la la, looking over here, and Luke did them for me, it was so much easier. And it also felt like we were a team in this together, rather than, well, I'm doing this for a few weeks and then you're sort of stepping at the end. It's like, no, we are doing this together.
Yeah, and that we is so critical. And the other thing, as far as the we aspect, as a couple going through it, is you should not look at each other that you are a burden on one another. Oftentimes I hear men saying, I'm a burden on my wife because I malfactor infertility, or she feels that she's a burden on me because we're going through fertility treatments and has all these things going on. You shouldn't look at each other as a burden and think of it more as, this is the experience that we're having together and helping our relationship grow further. So that mindset piece is so important.
And really having that space to talk openly and honestly with each other. But then I think it's really helpful for each partner to have someone else, somewhere else, to go and talk openly, because your experience may be very different from your partner's because of, literally what you're asking your body to do throughout the treatment. And so this is why I think it's so helpful that I think it's great having support groups as well where couples can go, but I think actually having a space that's like a male space and a female space to go and just talk really openly about the issues that only affect, I'm the one doing the injections, you're the one that has to do the sample, you're helping with the injections, you have to put up with all the emotions and the mood swings that's happening. But if you can go away but then come back together as well and discuss that, so helpful.
Yeah, definitely. And in terms of the injections, I think what'll be really great is if we change the mindset of, what are these injections? There's no education out there about what is infertility, what is miscarriage. So if we change that mindset, everybody goes to their, family medical practitioner for their annual physical, and kids growing up get shots. And if we can change the mindset to tell people that these fertility shots to go try and conceive a baby is just like a regular shot, like you're going to the doctor and you're going, trying to prevent meningitis and all these shots that you get as a child, like it's totally normal, it's totally fine. There might be some side effects, but at the end of the day, there's nothing to be afraid of that needle. A lot of people, like you said, are needle not friendly. They're scared of needles. They don't like being poked. But if we normalize this conversation and explain to people what is fertility, what is the process of fertility, what is the process of a miscarriage, and explain how it works and do some early interventions, and I think people will be in a better place.
But something that really helped me and that really helped my clients is, instead of seeing it, I had a huge amount of resistance to doing fertility treatment, and I didn't want to be doing it. And so when it came to the shots, I was like, I shouldn't be having to do this. And so I was really I was really resistant to them. And when I then switched that to being like, these hormones, they're just helping my body do what it is designed to do. So it's not like my body's completely broken and the IVF is what is going to bring us our baby. The IVF is simply supporting and helping your body. If you had any other diagnosis, you welcome on medication to support your body to heal. And if we see IVF as supporting your body to do what it can do, rather than it taking conception completely out of your hands, because your body is still doing it, your body is still producing the eggs, your body is still then taking that embryo on, and your womb is hosting the baby. That's a bit of a word, but allowing that baby to grow. And so instead of seeing it like, I think there's that language as well where we use the words like natural conception and then IVF, it implies that IVF is not natural conception. But obviously it is, because the conception we cannot make, even if we take a sperm and put it into an egg, we cannot make that into an embryo, into a baby. There's still nature there, that last part of the process.
There is that nature. And I think also throughout the process, I know we're talking about the do's and the don'ts. So for someone who's going through it, the best question that a friend or support can ask, if they don't even understand what it means, what fertility treatments are, and the impact that it has on you, on your work life, on your personal life, on your social life, is to ask them, what does it mean for you that you're going through fertility treatments? What does it mean for you that you've just had a miscarriage or a stillbirth or whatever that challenge is? And then from that question, allow that person to open up and explain what it is, and then have them ask, well, how can I help you? How can I help you get through this? Because then there's more of this understanding and this bigger communication picture, and it helps people get through it.
And talking of that, what are the do's and don'ts you have for if someone does experience a loss?
So the do's and don'ts of if someone experiences a loss, one is let give the men time to process it and grieve. Usually when a man goes through a loss, they're having all these thoughts about their careers, about where they're going to live, what they're going to do with their lives, when they want to have another child again. Uh, every type of thought that you can imagine is going through their brain. So give them the space to process it, talk about it, and get on the same page when trying again. A lot of times men are not always on the same page as their wives when it comes to doing another cycle or another trying for a baby again. To give them the time to process, say, hey, are you ready for this? Should we embark on this journey again, or do we need more time to process it? And also set boundaries for yourself, because there will be triggers. So know what your triggers are and know how to deal with that. And the don'ts are, try not to go down the depression, and know that this was not caused by you. You did not cause this loss to happen. It happened for whatever reason. It was natural occurrence. It happens to a lot of people. And Know that you did not cause it. It does not make you any less of a man. Don't dive into, research about it. Try and take it, process it that it happened, at the same time by openly communicating with your spouse and also talking about it with others. Seek mental health mental health professionals to talk about it. I encourage that tremendously. Talk to your friends about it. Take out an activity. If you have a hobby of doing photography, maybe do some photography. Use your any creative space that you have when you've experienced this to try and express it and get it all out there, because you will have these emotions, you will have these feelings. It gets bottled up, and if you don't utilize the creativity that you have, even if you're an introvert, if you like to play video games, or you find whatever circle that makes you happy, utilize that and be creative within that space. And the don'ts are, if you have a trigger and you don't want to deal with that trigger, try not to avoid it. Avoiding and is one of the worst things you can probably do for yourself. And the don't aspect is, don't just stand by the side watching, right? Push it. Like I said, it was same thing with IVF. Push the doctors as much as possible, especially when it comes to dealing with the loss, because it's very traumatic. Nobody ever ask you how you are actually doing with it, because it's always about the female patient who's right in front of them. It's always about them. So if you're experiencing loss, you have to unfortunately go from ultrasound to confirm it, and then wait for a DNC or wait for a pill and watch the trauma. Try as much as possible to advocate for her and say, wait a second, you're talking about someone, obviously we're going through something emotionally and physically right now, but let's try and get a date on the calendar for a DNC as close as possible, or do it today, or something like, try and help us now as much as possible. Might be not an emergency situation because she's not bleeding at the moment, but at the same time, be an advocate. You are your best advocate. The more you talk to them, the more you advocate for yourself and for your spouse, the better off you will be, and that success will come.
Following on from that, what support can women offer to their partners going through this?
It's a good question. So a woman, in terms of support for their spouses, they can be encouraging. Say, I know you didn't, I didn't know you didn't cause it. If when you want to talk about it, we can talk about it together. You can give me a hug. We can cry about it together. We can go on a walk, maybe take a vacation. Maybe we could seek professional help if you want to see, a mental health professional. Be as supportive for them. Allow them to cry on your shoulders. Allow them to talk about it. Allow them to process it and say it's okay to have these emotions, and that I just know that it's okay. And encourage them to take on maybe a new hobby, to go out with friends, and don't let them just sit around the house going down the depression side because they went through this. If you see that they are acting depressed or having more anxiety or any of the other mental health issues, encourage them to seek mental health support, and encourage them to share their stories and their journeys and speak to their friends and family and those people that they can trust, chaplain, whoever is in their network. I recommend to people that you have 2 to 3 people to talk to about this. So it could be your best friend, it could be a sibling, it could be a teacher, it could be a chaplain. Have 2 to 3 people in your network that you trust when you're going through IVF or dealing with a loss, that you can actually talk to.
I think it's really interesting, like I say, have more than one person to talk to, because each person that you go to will be will play a different role. So I wrote a post years ago about having, a support team. And it's not just about having that one go-to person. It might be that you have your best friend that is the person that you can go to, who is just like, this is shit, isn't it? Like, let's go and do something to take your mind off it. Then you need someone who can support you and maybe offer coaching and advice of how to help you move forward, be that with an actual diagnosis or with mental health support and trauma release support. Then you might just need someone who's maybe been through it before, so really understands. So I love that, having this whole selection of people that at different times you're going to need like a different type of conversation, a different type of support.
And the other thing to add to that, yes, you need those different types of people to talk to, is you have to know your boundaries. If someone asks you a question, what's going on? Why don't you have a child yet? Why did you suffer a miscarriage? How do you feel? And you don't feel comfortable answering that question, it's okay to say to them, I'm sorry, I've gone through something right now. I don't feel comfortable talking about it right now. I'll let you know, when I want to talk about it, and give the and appreciate that and let them have their space to process what's going on.
And yeah, that's really strong, isn't it? Because there's no one has the right to like know, like, especially I think with parents, sometimes it can be that parents are like, well, what's going on? And we want to know, it's about our grandchild. And it's like, well, no. Like it's your life. And it's also, and that can be a source of conflict, I find, in relationships, that one partner may want to be more open with friends, with family, and the other partner doesn't. So this is the joy of when there are fertility specific support groups that are a confidential space where you can go and talk, and no one knows your spouse, no one knows what's going on. So it's sort of a different level. If there was that conflict between you, that one partner has said, I don't want you speaking to anyone about this, obviously really talk about that, because it may be for whichever partner, it's actually really important for them to talk to their mum about it, or to talk to their sibling, or to talk to their friend. And so really get to the bottom of, well, why do you not want me to share? Fair enough if you don't want to tell everyone, but if there were just a few people that say, this is really confidential, this doesn't go any further.
Yeah, and I want to touch upon what you said in regards to parents. Oftentimes, parents put pressure on their kids because they want to become a grandparent. And oftentimes, that pressure leads to tension between a parent and a child. So, that's not necessarily a good thing. I think with parents, it's important for them to know that you're going through fertility treatments or that you suffered a loss. But also at the same time, if you do get successfully pregnant after a cycle or a miscarriage, know your boundaries and know how to approach telling people. It's not like you want to go blabbing to people within the first trimester, because the first trimester is so risky. Many things can go wrong. So try and keep it as close to yourselves as possible, and explain also to your parents and to your siblings, so you don't get compared to them. Oh, my sister has 2 kids, right? Why don't you have any kids yet? Or my coworker at work has 1 or 2, and you're at a family, a work picnic.
And what other tips have you got that are for everyone rather than specific partners? What other advice would you like to share today?
The advice I would have for everybody is get tested early. Early intervention is key. Know what you can and cannot handle, and know that if you're not able to handle it, maybe don't go down the road of IVF. Maybe look at adoption, maybe look at surrogacy, because know what your limitations are. If you know what your limitations are, I think you'll be very successful in this road. And also, the general advice I have for people is speak to as many people as possible. Interview your potential physicians. Meet as many people as you can. Talk about it with as many people as you can, because the more information you have at your fingertips, the better.
And it can be a lot of the time that we're scared of, all humans, we're all scared of what we don't understand or we don't know. So yeah, bringing in that education piece can really help you then feel more comfortable. Like, no one skips into IVF going, yay, I'm so excited we get to do this really invasive and expensive treatment now. Like, nobody does that. I think there's this expectation, I think sometimes as well, when someone announces then they are doing IVF, and be like, well, that's really exciting. Because I think the thought that people have, sort of the general public, is IVF equals a baby. And obviously, as we know, it doesn't for everyone. It does for most people, but not everyone. So it's kind of really getting that education as well of, we might be going into, we might be doing 3 rounds of treatment. A lot of clinics offer 3 rounds as like the standard, because you're a lot more likely to end up with a pregnancy if you go in thinking we're doing 3 rounds of this. Building up that education, but also understanding if you do have major fear. So like for me, fear of needles. So I used emotional freedom technique to remove that phobia so that I was able to do treatment. If I hadn't actually dealt with that phobia, I wouldn't have been able to do stimulated IUI. I wouldn't have been able to do IVF. So I was like, that's an issue. That's a blocker for us moving forwards. So I like, right, I can go and I can work with someone and I can clear that fear.
Yeah, those are great points. And the other thing I would add as general advice is don't for men out there, obviously we have that room where we have to produce. Don't put that pressure on yourself. Try and mentally prepare yourself for that experience. It's not just about that one room. So the more you involve yourself in the process, the more knowledge you have, the more people you speak to, the network you have, these conversations, like you said, to get over these fears early on and to have the right facts at your fingertips is so crucial.
And talk to us about why you set up Men's Helpline.
So I founded Men's Helpline. The backstory of how we set it up was 6 years ago. I'm married now 6 years. Before we got married, I did genetic testing and found out that we're carriers for two of the same genetic conditions, which meant that I had to undergo IVF with PGD, pre-genetic diagnosis. So we moved from the United States to Israel actually for fertility treatments because it's covered here in Israel, and did a round of IVF. Was successful. Did an embryo transfer that was successful, and then 12 weeks into the pregnancy, we suffered a miscarriage. And when that happened, I was just completely devastated. I had a lot of thoughts going through my mind. I didn't really have any resources. I found one random Facebook group. My wife had all of the support in the world, hotlines she could call, support groups, networks of friends. It just was a normal part of conversation. I just had nothing. So I realized that there was such a need for support for men, and I realized I had to do something about it. So I went back to school to get my master's and spearheaded a support group, and it's just been flying ever since. I created the organization to spread the word, awareness, education, advocacy, and support for guys who are going through this, because there's a lot of misinformation out there, and men need to understand, how do we get through this?
Where can they find you to get support?
They can find me on Instagram at men's_helpline. They can find me on LinkedIn. They can go on our website, menshelpline.org. They can email me, daniel@menshelpline.org. They can listen to some of our podcasts, and yeah, they can reach out via WhatsApp, call me. I'm fully available.
Fantastic. And to finish off, if there was one more thing that you want to share with the Embrace Fertility listeners, what would it be? Something that you wish everybody could know?
It's a good question. I wish everybody could know before you went into fertility treatments or miscarriage that it's completely normal, and that society is not going to treat you differently because you're going through fertility treatments or you suffered a loss, and that the stigma should hopefully go away the more we talk about it. And I wish that we were educated on these issues prior to middle school, high school, college, and that it was just part of everyday life. The more we talk about it, the more educated people become, and the less trigger it's going to be and have that impact on people. So what people should know is that you're not alone, right? 1 in 4 pregnancies end in a miscarriage. 1 in 6 couples struggle with infertility. So keep talking to your neighbors and friends about it, and spreading the word and spreading the awareness. So when someone goes through it, and utilize those skills that you gain throughout the fertility journey process, or even a miscarriage, that make you a stronger person. And now take those skills and help someone else in need who's going through it, because you have those tools at your fingertips from your personal experience, and now you can help someone else get through it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Daniel. I think this has been it's a really needed conversation, and I'm really looking forward to sharing this with everyone. I will put all of your contact details below in the show notes so people can get in touch. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And if you've enjoyed today's show, please do subscribe to the podcast or my YouTube channel. And if you're not already on my mailing list, please come over to embracefertility.co.uk, hit the free class page, and you can download the latest recording of the free class I ran a few weeks ago. And you'll also get a weekly newsletter with so updates whenever there's a new podcast or a new interview, and sharing things throughout both my own journey and speaking to amazing experts. Thank you, everyone.